In the last lesson, we covered dominant seventh chord, and we used this chord as a model to learn something about something more in general about seventh chords. So how to resolve the seventh in seventh chords and how to play them at the piano. But then we focus only on dominant seventh chord, and in the last lesson we introduced inversions of dominant seventh chords. And another very important topic of last lesson was how to use the passing seventh chords, which are some very important chords in which we can switch from a normal, we could say, dominant chord to a dominant seventh chord. So we can switch between different tangents, between different musical situations. So today we're going to introduce other chords, and so we're going to cover chords, seventh chords built on leading tone, either in the case of a major scale and in the case of a minor scale. But before we start with this, we have to point out some last things about dominant seventh chord, because the question now is how can we decide to use or not to use a dominant seventh chord? So when can we choose to use a dominant seventh chord or a normal dominant chord? So we already know that a dominant chord has a dynamic role, is a dynamic chord. But it is a consonant chord. So when we need to have a stronger tension or a stronger tendency to move to another chord, for example, with a perfect cadence or with an interrupted cadence, in this case we can add the seventh, so we can switch to a dominant seventh chord. So we can choose to use the seventh, and in this way we have a stronger sense of tension, so a stronger tendency to move. So if we want to have something which is more dynamic, with more tension, we can choose a seventh chord, so a dominant seventh chord. And if we want to have not so strong tension, not so strong sense of movement, okay, we can use only a dominant chord. And it is very important to point out that the tension that we have by introducing the seventh in the dominant seventh chord, it is because of two reasons. Because when we introduce the seventh, so the four notes, we don't introduce only one dissonance, so the seventh between the root and the seventh. So not only this dissonance, but by introducing the seventh, we introduce another dissonance inside this chord, which is between the third and the seventh. Because in this case, here I have a diminished fifth interval. So while in the case of a dominant chord, I have no dissonances, by introducing this note, so the seventh, suddenly I introduce two dissonances, the seventh as the diminished fifth. So this is the reason why by introducing the seventh with the dominant chord,